let's be honest, you're not getting the full experience of this show if you're not watching it with all of your lights off, and then all of a sudden you're trying to unplug your computer, but you accidentally unplugged your Christmas lights in your room instead, so you're like, oh, no biggie, and you go to plug them in, but you're staring directly at the light source as they turn on and you blind yourself. That's true Sun Summoner business. Hello, my name is Jenna, and today you're watching another WWM Productions video, and what a concept. I'm finally reviewing that show I've been talking about, the show that a lot of people have been talking about apparently. It's the only thing that's been on my Instagram Explore page for 3 weeks. Shadow and Bone. I was so excited and also very nervous because it's adapting partially one of my favorite books and just another book series that I do really enjoy, and these are books that I thought really deserved a good adaptation, and I was so happy to watch it. I had a blast watching it. It was so great. I guess there are two parts in my head when I go about reviewing it. There's the part of me that has read the books, and there's the part of me that's trying to just look at it as a TV show. And I guess those two reviews are very different from each other. I'll go to the more personal note and do the adaptation side of things first. I think Shadow and Bone is one of the better book to film adaptations that you will see out there. Editing me here, I made a note for myself while I was filming to put a synopsis in where I was talking, only for me to realize that I didn't actually record a synopsis. Basic plot of the show: it follows a mapmaker orphan in an army in this nation where there are normal people and there are people called Grisha, and there's something in the almost straight down the middle of her country called the Shadow Fold, and the Shadow Fold is this thing that was created by this evil guy who has the power over shadows. It just rips down the middle of this country and separates the west from the east, and they have wars going on with their two border countries, so things are not good. So this girl, Alina Starkov, has to travel across the fold because her kind of best friend in the whole world is crossing, and she's like, no, where you go, I go, I'm coming with you. She's on this boat going across the fold, there are monsters, the boat gets attacked, and she unleashes this power inside of herself that she never knew she had. Suddenly everyone's like, oh my gosh, this is the person that we've been dreaming of. This is someone who could break the Shadow Fold. And so she goes off and she is training and learning about these forces, and she comes in contact with this man called the Darkling. Her opposite, he controls the shadows, and he's someone who has been working to break this, so she has to work together with him, and she has to figure out this power inside of herself while also navigating all of these different new relationships and also her relationship with her best friend. We have this other trio of characters called the Crows, and they're criminals in another country who are kind of friends, and they get this job. This job is to kidnap the Sun Summoner and bring them back to their country. It's this moving puzzle piece of a fantasy story, and anyway, that's the synopsis. Back to the real video. Goodbye. It definitely cares about its source material, and more than that, it really just works to fully bring it to life in a way that expands upon the books and makes them better because it's its own material that isn't a book. One of the biggest hopes I had for this series was there were a lot of issues I had with the books that, if they were a show, probably wouldn't exist. And one of the things I disliked about the books is that Alina is a very passive main character, and while it serves a thematic purpose, I do think that at times it's just being in her head constantly and having that be the only vehicle of the story was just difficult to fully appreciate it, when it's on the one hand, I totally see what you're doing here, Leigh Bardugo, and that's great. But on the other hand, do we have to deal with this all the time? So I think having her as a main character in a show where you're less inside of her head and more watching everything unfold, because it is a political drama, I think that does do a lot of work for the show. But not even that, like, the adaptation quality itself is just so great. It cares so deeply about the world that it's inhabiting, and just the details and everything. One of my favorite things about the show was the production design, just all of the costumes, and even like the effects and all the little details they put into everything. It all came together so well, and the world feels lived in and very much its own. Everything just looked like top-notch quality. It was fantastic. All of the costumes, like, nothing looked out of place. Everything just had like such a level of like care and detail put into it that definitely makes it worthy of it being like this kind of like fantasy epic of like wide sweeping world. It being an adaptation, it definitely takes the fact that it isn't a book and works around that to bring such greatness to the screen. It improves upon so much too. Like, it definitely saw some of the flaws in the books and was like, we're gonna spruce this up a bit. Like, Mal is such a better character in this show. It just, he wasn't a bad character in the books. I didn't mind him. Other people, like, hated him. But he's definitely a lot better in the TV show, and just, they show it through all these different flashbacks to them as kids and all of the different parallels that they can do in a way that a book can't. And again, it's definitely trying really hard to ensure that it's doing the books justice, while at the same time it's not afraid to break out of their shadow. I wasn't super worried about the Shadow and Bone series because, if anything, I was willing to like see what they did with it because I didn't have like such strong feelings about it. But the Six of Crows book, okay, like, this is where the adaptation business gets like weird, because you're adapting two books that like just chronologically don't go together, and they're throwing them like into the same timeline. So that was the weird bit. And while there's like a weird cognitive dissonance between the part of me that's like, how is this gonna play into anything later, and the other part of me is like, yes, crows, good, great, love it. So while it was weird, once I was able to turn that part of my brain off and just like watch the show and enjoy it, it was great. They definitely understand the characters and their stories, and I know some people have been complaining about how they felt like the characters were progressing a little too fast, but at the same time, we're not in their minds as much as we are in Six of Crows, so I think you definitely have to show them actually how they're feeling and all of these different things that otherwise we wouldn't see. So I think the show would be a whole lot less good without actually showing their different emotions and things that they're doing. Normally it would just tell us that, but because it's a show, you have to show. Like, show don't tell. If you tell us, it's going to be boring. I know we're not in Ketterdam for very long. Like, Ravka looks cool and everything because you have like this war-torn landscape, and then you have like the big palace and everything, but Ketterdam, just the few moments it was in the show, just, it's so different from how I imagine it, but God, I would go to Ketterdam and like get pickpocketed 3 times over, but I would go to Ketterdam. As a book adaptation, I think it's like 10 out of 10, does such a good job. It just takes it, brings it to a whole nother level. It definitely appreciates its source material, but also isn't just a carbon copy. It definitely takes some risks, and those risks pay off, and it definitely has worth on its own. But now, when you look at it on its own, here's where I'm a little unreliable, because I have read the books. I know a lot about the books. If you are someone who has not read the books and is not familiar with them, I don't know how much of the show will make sense to you. It definitely does have that effect where it doesn't always do a good job of explaining things. However, that is fairly canon typical of the books. You kind of just take the information and roll with it. You're not going to get an explanation. So, to be fair, at least it's accurate. While not everything will make total sense, I think you can still be intrigued and enjoy it. I don't know, it's hard to tell, so you might not understand everything, but I still think there's a lot to enjoy. So with that little caveat, I think as a show, again, I've already talked about like the production and the writing too is incredible. I think this is still just a really fantastic show. There might have some effect of not understanding everything that's happening, but at the same time, there's always a level of like how much do I have to turn my head off to appreciate this, especially with things that aren't like an outright like thinky piece of media. And I think you can still get something out of it if you are analyzing it, but if you are just looking for like a fantasy show to escape into, this is definitely something that can satisfy both sides of the aisle. I guess the writing itself too, like it is an adaptation, so it's not like everything is like built from the ground up, but the pacing is really great, and how each episode definitely has its own, like, there is a problem here. That problem is both building throughout the season, but we also have to contain it to this episode, and if that works especially well with the crows in it, because the Shadow and Bone books are like very purely political intrigue, and they kind of have a slow build until they get to a point in the book where then a whole bunch of stuff happens in fast succession in the plot. So I think throwing the crows in there definitely creates a more like itemized list of things that have to happen, and definitely keeps the show moving. The crows are criminals, and they're on one big job with a whole bunch of little jobs. Meanwhile, Alina has one big mission, but to get to that end goal, she has to keep everything in check and learn as she goes. So I definitely think that as a show, it's like, it's compulsively watchable. Like, I watched like 4 episodes in one night. Overall, it was just a really lush, dark fantasy with magic and alliances and powers and like criminals. Like, if you like criminal, morally gray characters, do it. And it wasn't cringe either. Like, it was definitely based off of a YA book set, but at the same time, it definitely didn't feel like YA-y. And I was really satisfied with it. I thought it was really fantastic. There are definitely some directing choices that I did not appreciate and just felt a little off to me. The style of the show sometimes felt like a little jagged, especially when you're jumping between 2 separate storylines that don't really seem to connect. They definitely are trying a little too hard to connect the crows to Alina, and while overall I think it eventually works out, it's definitely a little strange, and most of the critiques I have are nitpicks, and that they didn't take away from the overall experience. They were just things that the more I thought about it, the more I was like, I wish, but they're not major problems, I think, with it. This better get a second season, if only, so Milo the Goat gets more content that he deserves. Oh my god, Milo the Goat was the best thing that happened. Oh, I think I covered the big bases. Good adaptation, pretty good show, might be a little confusing, some gripes, but overall so much time and effort put into it. Definitely worth the experience, because that's what it is, an experience that is highly worth watching, and I implore you to watch it, and also Milo the Goat. The characters were definitely the things that I was most worried about, especially because, like, the Six of Crows characters are some of my favorite, just, of all the books I've read, like, the many, many books. I adore the Six of Crows characters, and they were definitely something I was worried about, but between the trio of crows and Nina and Matthias, but the Nina and Matthias scenes were, like, 10 out of 10, so perfect and accurate, and while a lot of them were just like drag and drop from the books, the actors did such a good job. Like, oh my god, like, all of the acting in this show was just top notch. Everyone just brought so much to the table, and they cared about their roles, and I stand the acting in this show. Like, I don't always notice acting just because it's never, like, I'm too distracted looking at like the scenery, but the acting in this show just, the trio of crows, R.I.P. Wyland, they were the ones I was most worried about, but even then they did such a good job. The small stuff that they definitely put into their roles, and just, I think they did a really great job of bringing this cast of characters to the screen, and even with like the Darkling, which the Darkling has an interesting following on the internet. In case you were wondering, there are some stans, which, even then, he is a magnetic force in this show, like, in the way that he's supposed to be. Like, one of, like, the resounding parts of this show is, one of the characters says it, don't trust powerful men, or, like, don't fall for powerful men. And that's kind of just an ongoing theme with this book and the show, because so much of it is everyone wants to use Alina for her powers, but but the people that are closest to her are the people who get to know her as a person and mean the most to her in that way. And she's stronger for the people that she knows, not just her power. And I think they did such a great job capitalizing on that. And I just appreciated everything that they did for the characters. I thought that their writing was great. It was funny when it needed to be, emotional when it needed to be, heavy just in the right ways. And I was definitely so relieved when I saw the direction they were going with all the characters, and just, that's good. And I have so many ideas for a second season. Like, the second book in the series definitely leaves a lot to be desired. I think I will fight and I will die on the hill that the second book, Siege and Storm, is by far the worst. Like, I was 100 pages in, I was reading this on the bus, and thing happens, and I was like, okay, why, like, the whole 300 other pages in this book? And I did not get an answer, because literally the only other things I remember from the rest of those pages was the last 30 pages and Nikolai. Literally, that's it. A whole character who everyone loves, probably because he's the only, like, consistently good thing in this series, and freaking the climax of the book. That's it. And even then, I forgot half of that. So, please give us the Ice Court. Please, I've planned it out in my mind. You only need 4 episodes in full, not even, to cover Siege and Storm. So, and that was being kind. You have 4 other episodes. Give us the Ice Court, I beg you. I definitely think Shadow and Bone is a show that we could all use right now, just in the sense that it's a good show to just kind of go into, let your mind kind of wash away for a bit in the world around you and get immersed into something else where there can be hope and light and all of that good stuff, and just enjoying yourself and being somewhere completely different. Also, it's about an ordinary girl who discovers this power inside of herself and tries to bring it to light, and has to figure out how does that apply to the world around her, and trying to do some good in the world while also meeting the people that kind of start to make up her world and what that means for her future. I just adored it. And I don't always do number scores, but I think for this I am, just because it's a straight up review. So out of 10, I wavered between like 8, 8.5, but I think I'm gonna bump it up to a 9, because you know what, it's my video, partially my channel, like 25% my channel, like 25% plus tax. I guess I'll do that. I'm gonna round it up to a 9 because I make the rules here, evidently. Thank you so much for watching this video and listening to me rant about this show that I think is just super fantastic. If you have any ideas for videos you want me to make or anything that you want me to watch, please leave them in the comments. I always am in need of video ideas. Leave a like if you enjoyed this video. Subscribe if you are so inclined. We have a podcast that updates every week on Wednesdays, just about, and we do weekly videos on Sundays, just about, sometimes, most of the time, with my channel partner and I, so it's always a mixed bag of what you're going to get, so I think it's a good idea to subscribe and see what's going to happen. I'm going to leave you to the rest of your day. Thank you so much for watching, and you might want to fire up that Netflix account and watch Shadow and Bone, because I think it is worth it. See you.